Finally, I could feel the freedom I had longed for. From today, my parents will move in with me in this house, starting a new phase full of hope and change in our lives. After my parents passed away, my wife, Laura, didn't hesitate to destroy the house my family had been attached to for so many years. That evening, after dinner with my two children, Nathan and Sophie, I stepped out of the restaurant. Night had fallen, and the street in Springfield, Illinois, was quiet as usual, with streetlights casting a glow on the rain-slicked pavement. I was thinking about the changes ahead when my phone suddenly buzzed. Laura's name, my wife, flashed on the screen. I picked up, and immediately, her voice rang out. Cold and smug. "Daniel, I've destroyed your house. Asterisk. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Asterisk. I, Daniel Harper, 52 years old, an ordinary accountant, burst into laughter. My laughter echoed in the car, not out of pain or despair, but because the family house in Oakwood, a suburb of Springfield, where I grew up with my parents, George and Margaret Harper, held no inheritance wealth, as Laura and her parents, Richard and Evelyn Bennett, had delusionally believed. "What are you laughing at?" Laura shouted through the phone, her voice shifting from triumphant to panicked. "Don't you get it? That house is destroyed." That was the moment I decided to tell them the whole truth. I stopped laughing, my voice calm but sharp. "Laura, you're mistaken. There's no inheritance." She went silent, and I could imagine her face paling, her eyes widening. Laura, along with Richard and Evelyn in Decatur, Illinois, must have been standing amidst the rubble of the Oakwood house, thinking its destruction would force me to bring back a large sum of money, so they, especially her parents, could move in with us and live comfortably. But they didn't know that the house, with its old wooden walls and the scent of days gone by, held no monetary value as they expected. To me, it was my entire childhood, memories of my parents. But as for wealth, I had not a dime to bring back as they imagined. I hung up, gripping the steering wheel tightly, a mix of anger and amusement rising within me. They had made a mistake, and my laughter was the knife cutting through their arrogance. It all began a year ago, when my father, George Harper, died in a car accident. He passed suddenly, leaving my mother, Margaret, in unbearable grief. My father's funeral was held at Springfield Funeral Home, where my mother sat in the front row, her eyes red, her trembling hands clutching his framed photo. Laura and her parents, Richard and Evelyn, were there. But they stood in the corner of the room, chatting cheerfully, as if at a party, oblivious to my pain. I tried to stay composed, shaking hands with each visitor. But Laura's indifferent gaze cut into my heart like a knife. "Mom, you need to eat something," I whispered. But she just shook her head. "I'm not hungry, Daniel. I'm just tired." I knew she was breaking, and I was powerless. Just a few weeks later, my mother was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. She weakened rapidly, and soon, she too was gone, leaving me drowning in double loss. My mother's funeral was held at the same Springfield Funeral Home, and this time, Laura and her family were even more callous. They stood in the back row, whispering and giggling, while I stood by my mother's casket, trying to hold back tears. Evelyn demanded to take the scarf my mother had knitted, as if it were just a worthless trinket. "No, you can't take it," I said, my voice firm. Evelyn flushed, angry, but I didn't back down. That was the first time I confronted them directly, and Laura's reproachful look only made me more suspicious of her. My family lived in a rented house in Springfield, but the Oakwood house, where my father taught me to fix cars in the garage, where my mother made fragrant cookies, was my true heart. Laura never understood its value. She always put her parents, Richard and Evelyn, above everything. "Daniel, what's so special about your family?" she once said, her voice dripping with contempt. Those words, looking back, foreshadowed her betrayal. I called my sister Claire in Seattle, Washington, after my mother's death. "Daniel, I'm sorry, I couldn't make it back in time." Claire choked out over the phone. "But you're strong, right?" I nodded, though she couldn't see. "Don't worry, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Nathan and Sophie were my only comfort. Sophie texted, "Dad, if Mom doesn't care, I'll be there for you." Nathan said, "Dad, don't let Grandma make you sad." Their words kept me grounded, but they couldn't erase the growing distance between me and Laura. The Oakwood house, now just rubble, was where I grew up, where my father told jokes and my mother knitted scarves. I remember the smell of old wood, the creaking floors, the small garden where my mother grew daisies. Laura thought destroying it would bring money, but Claire received most of the estate, cash and stocks, since she lived far away. I was only tasked with managing the house, with the intent to rent it out, if not lived in. Laura's plan, backed by Richard and Evelyn, had collapsed from the start. I sat in the car, my eyes still fixed on the empty Springfield, Illinois street after Laura's call. My laughter upon learning she destroyed the family house in Oakwood still echoed in my mind, but anger was gradually taking over. Laura and her parents, Richard and Evelyn Bennett, had gone too far, and I knew that to face them, I needed strength. But first I had to recall what led to this moment, what made me realize Laura wasn't the wife I thought she was. Everything became clearest at my mother's funeral, Margaret Harper, where her and her family's callousness laid everything bare. Looking back, I see myself standing in Springfield Funeral Home, where my mother's farewell was held. The air was heavy, the faint smell of white daisies lingered, and dim light from the stained glass windows made everything gloomier. I stood by my mother's casket, gripping her framed photo, trying to hold back tears. She passed just weeks after my father, George Harper, who died in a car accident. Lung cancer took her quickly, giving me no chance for a proper goodbye. I looked at her face in the photo, still gentle as when she baked cookies in the Oakwood kitchen, and my heart ached. I wanted her to know I loved her, that I tried my best, though time was too short. Nathan and Sophie, my children, stood beside me, holding my hands for comfort. Nathan, 28, an engineer, whispered, "Dad, she'd be proud of you." Sophie, 25, a freelance journalist, wiped tears and said, "She always loved you, Dad. You know that." My sister Claire flew in from Seattle, Washington, just in time for the funeral. "Daniel, you did everything you could," Claire said. Her voice choked. Their presence was my only solace, helping me stand firm amidst the crowd of mourners. But Laura, my wife, and her parents, Richard and Evelyn, were a completely different story. Laura didn't stand in the family area, where I and the kids were. She chose to stand in the corner, near the back row, with Richard and Evelyn, as if she were a guest, not my wife. They whispered and chuckled, as if at a party, rather than a funeral. I heard Evelyn say something about a Florida vacation, and Richard laughed loudly, causing a few people to turn and look. I clenched my jaw, trying to ignore them, but each laugh stabbed my heart. Relatives started murmuring. A distant aunt quietly asked Sophie, "Is something going on with Laura and your dad? Why isn't she with the family?" Sophie shook her head, but her eyes were worried. I knew those whispers would soon spread across Springfield, and that only hurt me more. I approached Laura, hoping she'd change her attitude. "Laura, can you stand in the family area?" I asked, my voice low but firm. She frowned, replying, "No, Daniel, I'm fine here. I'm not blood related to your mom." I was stunned, unable to believe she'd say that. "But you're my wife," I countered, trying to stay calm. Then Evelyn chimed in, her voice sharp. "Daniel, Laura's your wife, but not your mom's daughter. We're outside. You're the one who should be in the family." Her words felt like a slap. In Springfield, sons-in-law often stand with the family at funerals, but Laura and Evelyn treated me like a fool. I stood there, speechless, feeling a deep pain. It didn't stop there. After the funeral, when everyone gathered at the Oakwood house to pay respects, Evelyn infuriated me. She picked up the scarf my mother knitted, her favorite item, and asked, "Daniel, can I take this? Your mom doesn't need it anymore, right?" I was shocked by her audacity, right after my mother's funeral. "No, you can't take it," I replied, my voice firm, snatching the scarf back. Evelyn flushed, turning to Laura. "See? That's how he treats me." Laura looked at me, her eyes full of reproach, but I didn't back down. "We're not ready to divide my mom's belongings," I said, my voice cold. "Later, my family will decide." Evelyn huffed, muttering to Richard, "Unbelievable, such a disrespectful son-in-law." I heard but didn't react, only feeling an unbridgeable gap with Laura and her family. Sitting in the car now, I recall those moments, and everything becomes clear. Laura never truly cared about my family. At my father's funeral, she was just as indifferent, standing with Richard and Evelyn, laughing as if nothing happened. When my mother died, she was even worse, offering no comfort, no gesture of sharing my grief. I once thought she was just influenced by her parents, but now, I doubt her very character. Laura, the woman I married over 20 years ago, perhaps never understood the value of the Oakwood house, where my father told jokes, my mother knitted scarves, where Claire and I grew up in love. That house, though now rubble, remains my heart, and Laura destroyed it out of greed. Laura had gone too far, and to face her, I had to recall what happened, the signs I overlooked. My mother's funeral, Margaret Harper, exposed Laura's callousness, but the spa trip she arranged afterward fooled me, making me think she still had some affection. Now looking back, I realize it was just part of her plan. Days after my mother's funeral, when the pain of losing both parents still weighed heavily on me. My father, George Harper, died in a car accident, and my mother, just weeks later, was taken by lung cancer. The Oakwood house with the garage where my father taught me to fix cars, the kitchen where my mother made cookies, the small garden where she grew daisies, was all I had left of them, and Laura destroyed it. But before it all came to light, Laura suddenly changed her demeanor. One evening, she walked into the living room of our rented Springfield house, holding a white envelope. "Daniel, you should take a break," she said, her voice unusually gentle. "You've been through a lot, haven't you? Go to a spa with Nathan and Sophie, get some fresh air." She handed me a voucher for a resort in Galena, Illinois, a place known for its hot springs and peaceful setting. I was stunned, looking at Laura as if she were a stranger. After months of her indifference, after the way she and her parents laughed at my mother's funeral, this gesture confused me. "Really?" I asked, my voice skeptical. Laura smiled, a smile I now recognize as fake. "Of course, Daniel, you need to relax. Go with the kids, stay at their places for a few days if you want." I took the envelope, a spark of hope rising in me. Maybe Laura felt guilty for her behavior at the funeral, for refusing to stand with me in the family area, for how Evelyn, her mother, demanded my mother's scarf. Maybe she wanted to mend things. I called Nathan and Sophie right away, and both were surprised. "Mom suggested that," Nathan asked over the phone, his voice full of doubt. "I thought she didn't care about that stuff." Sophie texted, "Dad, it sounds weird, but if Mom wants it, go for it. I'll arrange things." I smiled, thinking maybe the kids were right, and I needed time to heal. The trip to Galena was a balm for my soul. The resort nestled among green hills, with a shimmering lake and fresh air. Nathan, Sophie, and I rented a small room, and those days were filled with laughter. We soaked in the hot springs, the warmth easing my tension. Nathan talked about his new engineering project, his eyes lighting up as he described blueprints. Sophie shared about an article she was writing, her voice excited but not forgetting to ask, "Dad, are you really okay? Mom doing this, it feels strange." I nodded, saying maybe your mom wants to make up for things. But deep down, a sliver of doubt lingered. Evenings, we sat in the room, eating pizza and reminiscing about my parents. I told the kids about Oakwood days, when my father, George, taught me to fix cars in the garage, oil staining my hands, or when my mother, Margaret, baked cookies, their aroma filling the house. "Grandma made the best cookies," Sophie said, her eyes glistening. Nathan nodded. "I remember Grandpa's jokes, even if they were lame." We laughed loudly, and in that moment, I felt lighter, as if the pain of losing my parents had eased slightly. I thought about Laura, the voucher she gave, and told myself, maybe I'd been too harsh. Maybe she truly wanted to make amends. Before leaving Galena, I visited Nathan's place in Chicago, helping him organize his apartment, and cooking a few dishes my mother used to make. Sophie also welcomed me to her small Springfield apartment, where I baked a batch of cookies, using my mother's recipe. "Dad, they taste just like Grandma's," Sophie said, hugging me tightly. Those days I felt alive again, connected to my kids and memories of my parents. I texted Laura to thank her. "Thanks for the trip. It really helped." She replied briefly, "Good. Relax more, Daniel." I didn't think much of it, just felt grateful, and decided to return to Springfield, ready to start anew, with Laura. But now, sitting in the car after her call, I realized it was all a trap. The spa trip, the voucher, the sweet words, all to get me out of the way, so Laura and her family could destroy the Oakwood house. She thought I'd bring back an inheritance, but Claire, my sister, got most of it, cash and stocks. I was only tasked with managing the house, and now it's gone. When the car stopped, in front of the familiar plot, I was stunned. The Oakwood house, with its old wooden walls and the small garden where my mother grew daisies, was gone. In its place was a pile of rubble, broken bricks, splintered wood, and swirling dust. A bulldozer stood silently in the corner, like a witness to Laura's crime. I stepped out of the car, my legs trembling, unable to believe my eyes. The smell of burnt wood and damp earth hit me, choking me. The house, where my father told jokes, where my mother baked cookies, where Claire and I grew up, was now a desolate wasteland. I stood there, fists clenched, feeling like the world had collapsed. "Daniel," Laura's voice rang out from behind. I turned to see her standing with Richard and Evelyn, her parents, a few meters away. Laura wore a red coat, her face smug, while Richard, in a gray suit, stood with arms crossed, and Evelyn, with a smirk, looked at me like a victor. "So what now, Daniel?" Laura said, her voice triumphant. The house is gone. My parents will move in with you in the new house. Hurry up and bring the inheritance. I looked at her, then at Richard and Evelyn, and suddenly burst into loud laughter. My laughter echoed through the rubble, stunning all three. I stopped laughing, stepping closer to Laura, my voice cold. Laura, you're wrong. There's no inheritance. Her eyes widened, her mouth agape, as Evelyn cut in, her voice sharp. What are you saying? Don't lie. This house was worth a fortune. I shook my head, looking straight into her eyes. Claire got all the assets. Cash, stocks. I was only tasked with managing the house, and now, you've destroyed it. Richard's face reddened, stammering, no way. We checked. This house, I cut him off. You checked wrong. Laura stood there, her face pale, as if slapped. Their plan, to destroy the house to force me to bring money, so Richard and Evelyn could live with us, had collapsed right before their eyes. I turned back to the rubble, my heart aching. I remembered the last time I stood in the Oakwood kitchen, when my mother handed me a plate of cookies, smiling. Daniel, you're always my pride. I remembered my father in the garage, hands stained with oil, laughing when I botched a bolt. Those memories, Laura and her family erased, all for greed. Daniel, you can't do this to us. Laura screamed, her voice almost pleading. You must have something. Where's your parents' estate? I looked at her, my eyes without mercy. I told you, Laura. There's nothing. You destroyed the only thing I had left. Evelyn stepped forward, pointing at my face. You're ungrateful. We did this to help you. I gave a dry laugh, replying, help? You helped by destroying my house, right? I recalled my mother's funeral, at Springfield Funeral Home, when Laura stood in the corner, joking with Richard and Evelyn, ignoring my pain. I remembered when Evelyn demanded my mother's scarf, and Laura didn't say a word to defend me. The spa trip to Galena, I now realized, was just a trap to get me away, giving them time to execute this plan. Everything was clear. Laura wasn't just callous, she was calculating, and her family was complicit. I looked at the rubble again, betrayal surging within me. You've gone too far, I said, my voice low but firm. This isn't the end. Laura tried to yell something, but I was already walking to the car, not wanting to hear more. I called Nathan, my voice trembling. Son, your mom destroyed the Oakwood house. Nathan nearly shouted through the phone. What? She really did it? Dad, I'm coming now. Sophie texted right after. Dad, I'm on my way. Don't do anything yet. I knew my kids would be by my side, and that was the strength I needed. The house where my family lived had been destroyed. All because Laura and her family mistakenly thought I'd bring back an inheritance. When I revealed there was no inheritance, that my sister Claire got all the cash and stocks, it left Laura and her parents pale. But now, as anger surged, I knew I couldn't let them get away easily. They had gone too far, and I'd make them pay. I called Nathan and Sophie, my children, to tell them about this tragedy, and both rushed to me, bringing the support I needed. But what I didn't expect was that Laura and Evelyn's greed didn't stop at destroying the house. They even dared to steal my mother's legacy. Nathan arrived first, driving from Chicago to Springfield, his face flushed with anger. Dad, Mom really did this. Destroyed Grandma's house? He asked, his voice trembling. Sophie came right after, her eyes brimming with tears as she looked at the rubble. Dad, how could Mom do this? This house was everything to you, to Grandma, she said, hugging me tightly. I recounted Laura's call, how she declared, I've destroyed your house, and how she, Richard, and Evelyn demanded an inheritance. They were wrong, I said, my voice cold. There's no estate, but I won't let this slide. Nathan nodded. Dad, we have to do something. Mom and her parents can't get away. Sophie gripped my hand. I'll help you, Dad. They can't trample on Grandma's memory. I contacted a lawyer in Springfield, James Carter, who had helped my family after my father's death. His office was downtown, a small room with shelves full of papers and the faint smell of coffee. I sat across from him, recounting everything. The Oakwood house destroyed, Laura's call, and her misguided plan. Mr. Carter adjusted his glasses, flipping through the documents I brought. Property deeds. Daniel, I have good news, he said, his voice steady. The house is still in your mother's name, Margaret Harper. Laura and her family had no right to destroy it. This is illegal property destruction. I exhaled, a spark of hope igniting. So what can I do? I asked. He smiled. We'll demand compensation. They'll pay, in money and reputation. I left the office, relieved but still seething. Laura thought she could destroy the house and force me to submit, but the law was on my side. I called Laura, my voice calm but sharp. Laura, you destroyed the house illegally. My lawyer's preparing to sue. You and your parents will have to compensate. She screamed through the phone. You dare sue me? Daniel, you have nothing. Don't try to scare me. I gave a dry laugh. Just wait, Laura. She hung up, but I knew she was panicking. Her plan had failed, and now she'd face the consequences. But it didn't end there. A few days later, Sophie called me, her voice full of outrage. Dad, I found Grandma's stuff on a flea market app. I was stunned, opening my phone to check the link she sent. On the screen, the scarf my mother knitted, the one Evelyn demanded at the funeral, was listed for a pittance, along with a silver ring my mother used to wear. The seller was Eve Ben, 68, and I knew instantly it was Evelyn Bennett, Laura's mother. They're selling Grandma's things, Sophie said, her voice shaking with anger. Nathan texted right after. Dad, we have to get them back. I can't believe they're this shameless. Blood rushed to my head, rage exploding. Not only did they destroy the house, but Laura and Evelyn also stole and sold my mother's legacy like junk. I confronted Laura over the phone. Laura, how dare you and your mom sell my mother's things on a flea market? She denied it. What are you talking about? I don't know anything. I sent her the screenshot, my voice cold. Don't lie. Your mom's account. My mom's things. I'm reporting this to the police. Evelyn, when I called, was even more brazen. Daniel, I'm just repurposing some old stuff, she said, her voice sharp. Your mom doesn't need them anymore, right? I gritted my teeth. You had no right to touch my mother's things. Evelyn scoffed. You're so petty, Daniel. It's just junk. But I didn't let her continue. I reported it to the Springfield police, providing evidence from the flea market app. Within hours, Evelyn's account was frozen, and the police recovered the scarf and ring, returning them to me. I held the scarf in my hands, feeling its familiar stitches, and tears welled up. Sophie hugged me. Dad, we got them back. Grandma would be proud of you. Nathan gripped my shoulder. Dad, Mom and Grandma won't dare do anything else. My kids' support made me stronger, but my heart still ached. Laura and Evelyn didn't just destroy the Oakwood house. They tried to erase my mother's memory, but they underestimated me. I recalled my mother's funeral when Laura casually joked with her parents, as if nothing happened. Then the Galena spa trip, a trap to get me away, while everything was meticulously planned. I understood it all, and now I wouldn't let them escape punishment. Lawyer James Carter confirmed their actions were illegal, and Evelyn's selling of my mother's belongings on the flea market was exposed. Nathan and Sophie's support was a huge motivator, but the story wasn't over. An unexpected twist occurred, and this time Richard, Laura's father, would face the consequences of his family's mistakes. I had warned Richard about his health right after my mother's funeral at Springfield Funeral Home. He coughed constantly, his face pale, but when I suggested he see a doctor, he scoffed. Daniel, don't lecture me. I'm healthier than you think. Evelyn chimed in, her voice sharp. What? He thinks he's a doctor now. Mind your own family. Laura stood there, silent, giving me a reproachful look. I let it go, but I was worried. Now, as I prepared legal steps to sue Laura and her family, bad news struck. Richard was diagnosed with late-stage liver cancer. I learned through a call from Laura, her voice trembling, no longer smug, as when she announced destroying Oakwood. Daniel, my dad's really sick, she said, almost pleading. Can you help? I paused, remembering everything. How Richard joked at my mother's funeral, standing with Laura and Evelyn, treating me like an outsider. How he backed Laura's destruction of Oakwood, thinking I'd bring an inheritance. How Evelyn sold my mother's scarf and ring, and Richard didn't say a word to stop her. Help? I replied, my voice cold. When my mom was sick, did you or your parents care? Laura, you joked at her funeral, and your dad called me useless. Now you want my help? Laura choked, mumbling, but my dad's dying. Daniel. I hung up, my heart unmoved. I'm not cruel, but justice sometimes comes in unexpected ways. Richard weakened quickly. I heard from Sophie, who kept in touch with a relative of Laura's, that he refused treatment, saying no need to waste money. Evelyn and Laura panicked, calling me repeatedly, but I didn't answer. I remembered the Galena spa trip, the trap Laura set to get me away, so they could destroy Oakwood. Then Richard passed away. His funeral was held at a small funeral home in Decatur, Illinois, Laura's hometown. I didn't attend, despite Laura's pleading text. Daniel, at least come for my dad, I replied briefly. I'm busy. Nathan and Sophie supported my decision. Dad, they don't deserve it, Nathan said, his voice firm. Sophie nodded. You've done enough, Dad. They never respected Grandma. Richard's funeral, from Sophie's account, was cold and sparsely attended, unlike my mother's, where the whole Springfield community came to mourn. I wasn't happy about Richard's death, but I couldn't pretend to grieve for someone who disrespected my family. But the real shock came later. A week after the funeral, Richard's lawyer contacted me, informing me that he left a will, and Nathan, my son, was the heir to Richard and Evelyn's house in Decatur. I was stunned, unable to believe my ears. Nathan? Why Nathan? I asked. The lawyer explained. Mr. Bennett always liked him, though he didn't say it. He wanted to leave the house to his grandson. Laura and Evelyn, however, were not mentioned in the will. Laura called me immediately, her voice nearly screaming. Daniel, why does Nathan get my parents' house? What did you do behind my back? I gave a dry laugh. Laura, I didn't do anything. Your dad chose Nathan, not me. She screamed. No way. That house is mine. But I hung up, not wanting to hear more. I met Nathan and Sophie at Nathan's Chicago home to discuss. Nathan shook his head, still shocked. Dad, I don't get it. Grandpa never talked nicely to me. Why leave me the house? Sophie shrugged. Maybe he saw Mom and Grandma were too greedy. I nodded, feeling a spark of justice. Richard, though he disrespected me, perhaps realized his family's mistakes. The Oakwood house was destroyed. But now, Richard's house belonged to Nathan, like an unexpected compensation from fate. What will you do with the house? I asked Nathan. He looked at me, his eyes resolute. I'll figure it out, Dad. They don't deserve to keep it. Sophie smiled. Dad, justice is starting, right? I nodded, but inside, I was still reeling. The news of Richard Bennett's will, leaving the house to Nathan, not Laura or Evelyn, was a stunning blow that left them utterly broken. And I, after all, finally felt that justice was truly being served. The Oakwood house, where my mother's, Margaret Harper's, memories lived, was destroyed by their greed and inheritance delusions. But I fought back. With lawyer James Carter's support, we're preparing to sue. I also reclaimed what mattered most, the scarf my mother knitted, and her wedding ring, irreplaceable relics of love and memory. Throughout those stormy days, Nathan and Sophie stood by me, my strongest pillar. But I didn't expect that Nathan, with his simmering anger, would push justice further than I imagined, in a way Laura and Evelyn could never have foreseen. After the will's news, Nathan called me, his voice full of resolve. Dad, I've thought it through. The Decatur house is mine, but I don't want to keep it. Mom and Grandma don't deserve anything from Grandpa. After what they did to Grandma's house, I was surprised, asking, what are you going to do, Nathan? He replied, his voice firm. You'll see, Dad. I want them to feel what you went through. Sophie, hearing the plan, backed her brother. Dad, Nathan's right. They destroyed Grandma's house. They have to pay. I was worried, but part of me wanted Laura and Evelyn to face consequences. I nodded. Be careful, Nathan. I trust you. Nathan acted swiftly. He hired a demolition company in Decatur, and I was invited to witness. I drove to Decatur, my heart both anxious and heavy. Richard and Evelyn's house sat in a quiet neighborhood, with a white picket fence and a small flower garden, a place they once took pride in. But now, a large bulldozer was parked in the yard, and Nathan stood there, his gaze unwavering. Laura and Evelyn were notified and showed up just before the bulldozer started. Laura, pale, screamed, Nathan, what are you doing? This is your grandpa's house. Evelyn, hair disheveled, rushed forward. Stop. You can't destroy our house. But Nathan just looked at them, his voice cold. You destroyed my grandma's house. Now I'm destroying yours. The bulldozer roared, and I stood a few meters away, watching as walls crumbled. The sound of breaking bricks, splintering wood, and swirling dust reminded me of Oakwood's rubble. Laura wailed, running toward the bulldozer, but the company's workers stopped her. Nathan, please, stop, she begged, tears streaming. Evelyn sank to her knees, clutching her head. This is all we have. You can't do this. But Nathan didn't waver. He stepped forward, looking straight at his mother and grandmother. You destroyed Grandma's house, where my dad grew up, where her memories lived. You think I'd let you live peacefully in this house? Never. I stood there, torn between satisfaction and a trace of human empathy. Laura and Evelyn were losing everything, as I lost Oakwood. Demolition lasted less than an hour, but for Laura and Evelyn, it was like a lifetime. The house, once their pride, was now a pile of debris. Laura sat on the ground, sobbing, while Evelyn muttered, How did this happen? How? I approached Nathan, placing a hand on his shoulder. You sure about this, Nathan? He nodded, his eyes without regret. Dad, they deserved it. I did this for Grandma, For you. Sophie, standing beside, held my hand. Dad, now they know how you felt. I looked at the rubble, recalling Laura's words when she declared she destroyed Oakwood. I've destroyed your house. Now, Nathan had given her exactly what she did to me. But seeing Laura cry, I felt a pang of pity. Not for her, but for how people can drive themselves to tragedy through greed. I remembered my mother's funeral, when Laura joked with Richard and Evelyn, ignoring my pain. I remembered the Galena spa trip, a trap to get me away, and the Oakwood rubble, where I lost my parents' memories. Laura and Evelyn brought this on themselves, but Richard's death, and this demolition made me wonder, does justice truly bring joy? I turned to Nathan. You did well. But now, let's focus on the future, okay? He nodded. Yes, Dad. I just wanted them to understand. Laura stood, her eyes full of hatred, looking at me. Daniel, you put Nathan up to this, didn't you? You'll regret it. I shook my head. Laura, you and your mom did this yourselves. Don't blame anyone. Evelyn, still kneeling by the rubble, said nothing, just stared at me with empty eyes. I turned away, leaving Decatur with Nathan and Sophie. I sat in an armchair in the backyard of my new house, watching Nathan and his fiancée, Emily, laughing in the small garden. This house, built from the sale of Oakwood's land, is a fresh start for me, after months of pain. Laura and her mother, Evelyn Bennett, paid dearly for their greed. My family's Oakwood house was destroyed, but I reclaimed justice. Lawyer James Carter forced Laura to compensate. Nathan demolished their Decatur house. And now, I feel relieved, ready to leave the past behind. But above all, I know I learned a great lesson, and I'm determined to live differently from Laura and her family. After the Decatur demolition, Laura and Evelyn fell into ruin. They were forced to pay compensation from Richard's meager inheritance to avoid a lawsuit for destroying Oakwood. The money couldn't replace the memories I lost. The garage where my father, George Harper, taught me to fix cars. The kitchen where my mother, Margaret Harper, baked cookies. But it was enough to build this new house. Laura and Evelyn moved to a small rented place in Decatur, and their bad reputation spread through the community. People whispered about how they destroyed my house, sold my mother's belongings on a flea market, and ultimately lost their own home. They brought it on themselves, Sophie said, as we had dinner together. Nathan nodded. Dad, they can't blame anyone else. I reclaimed all my mother's belongings, the scarf she knitted, the silver ring she wore, and placed them in a wooden box in the new living room. Every time I look at them, I think of my mother, her gentle smile, and I know she'd be proud of me. The new house, though not Oakwood, brings warmth. The living room has a small fireplace, where Emily and I often cook pumpkin soup from my mother's recipe. Daniel, this tastes just like your mom's, Emily said, smiling. I laughed. You're a quick learner, kid. Sophie visits often, bringing stories about her new articles. Dad, I'm writing about justice, she said, her eyes shining. Your story is so inspiring. Those moments with Nathan, Sophie, and Emily are all I need. One evening, I stood and walked into the house, where Nathan and Emily were preparing food. Daniel, we're making your mom's soup tonight, okay? Emily asked, holding my mother's recipe. I nodded, smiling. Good job, kid. Go for it. Let me check. Sophie walked in, hugging me. Dad, this house feels so warm. I feel Grandma here, somehow. I looked around, sensing my mother's presence in every corner. The story of Daniel Harper, a 52-year-old man from Springfield, Illinois, reflects the values and challenges of life in the U.S. today, especially regarding family, greed, and justice. The Oakwood house, where Daniel grew up with memories of his parents, like fixing cars in the garage or baking cookies in the kitchen, represents the traditional value of a family home, still cherished in American culture, where communities like Springfield treasure memories and legacy. However, Laura and her parents, Richard and Evelyn, destroying Oakwood over inheritance delusions, reflect the dark side of materialism, a common issue in modern American society, where greed can overshadow family ties. Laura joking at Daniel's mother's funeral, and Evelyn selling her scarf on a flea market show a lack of respect for family values, similar to how some in America today prioritize personal gain over sentiment. Nathan's retaliation, demolishing the Decatur house, and Sophie's support highlight the role of the younger generation in upholding justice, a trend in America where social movements are often driven by youth. In today's American life, cherish family and memories over material gain. Like Daniel, stand up for what's precious, like the Oakwood house or his mother's relics, by using the law, as he sued Laura, rather than letting greed take over. Build genuine relationships, like Daniel with Nathan and Sophie, instead of being callous like Laura at the funeral. Ultimately, learn from Laura and Evelyn's mistakes. Greed only leads to loss, while love and justice, as Daniel found in his new house, bring lasting peace. Subscribe to the channel to explore more touching stories, like Daniel Harper's journey for justice. And thank you for joining us. See you in the next video, where we continue sharing profound life lessons.